he's a much-loved singer, a charity fundraiser and a fully paid-up member of the great and the good. But Gary Barlow is, it appears, not quite so paid up when it comes to tax. Reports at the weekend revealed that he and two other members of Take That have invested in what a court has ruled is a tax avoidance scheme. They now face having to pay back millions of pounds to the taxman, while some MPs have called for Barlow to hand back his OBE as well. Cordelia Lynch reports.
I'd wake up in a better place.
Gary Barlow isn't in a great place now. He's facing a £20 million tax bill. But the man he once joined on the campaign trail has rejected calls for him to be stripped of his OBE. Perhaps Downing Street learnt its lesson from singling out comedian Jimmy Carr 2 years ago.
I think he was given that award for his services to music, his immense charitable services with, for instance, Children in Need, the fact that he organised that fantastic concert for the Queen's Jubilee. He deserved his OBE and I think he should keep it.
In March 2010, Barlow and two others invested in a company called Larkdale LLP. The following month, Larkdale recorded massive losses of £25 million. This potentially allowed the investors to reduce their tax bill by offsetting the losses against any income. Last week, a judge at the tax tribunal ruled the scheme was set up to avoid tax.
Money, 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 money! Money! Money, 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 money! Money!
At this recording studio in London's East End, there was sympathy for the singer.
And unfortunately, he's the one that's getting the flack for something which lots and lots of people are doing.
Yeah.
I do take on board that. Obviously, if it's that much money, it does make sense for somebody to go and kind of every now and again check and find out and get reports as to kind of what's happening.
Even those drumming to a different beat were sounding supportive.
I just think Gary Barlow, he's just a soft, easy target, and I would kind of much rather see some faceless business guy, you know, who probably has swindled the taxpayers out of 400 or 500 times that amount. I'd like to see somebody like that being caught.
The taxman's taken all my dough.
It's a different take round the corner with these trainee hairdressers. The Icebreaker scheme was meant to, among other things, be funding aspiring artists.
I think it's diabolical, really. I think me personally being a business owner, opening up a hair academy for kids, struggled paying my taxes, haven't got any help from anyone, and someone of that, stature should have been paying his taxes.
Some accountants say clients would clearly know if they were investing in aggressive tax schemes.
I think anybody who got involved with it would have known that this is an aggressive tax scheme, and they would have had advice from learned tax counsel explaining the pros and cons of it.
But the government insists they've brought in stricter rules that will take on the kind of schemes used by Gary Barlow and many more.
Well, we're joined now by the Labour MP Margaret Hodge, who is chair of the Commons Public Accounts Committee, and Andrew Lillico from the Institute of Economic Affairs. And Margaret Hodge, let's start with the basics. What's he done wrong?
He's used a tax relief scheme, which we have, to encourage investment, not for the purpose that Parliament intended. So he's put money, or so-called money, into a vehicle, created a massive loss, and used that loss to offset his tax liability.
But there's nothing illegal about that.
Well, actually, I'm not sure about that, John, because the fact that today HMRC has found that the scheme is outside the law demonstrates it's illegal. Can I just say something about the law? Because I have no doubt that Andrew will tell me that we should get the law right. Of course we should get the law right. But the truth is, the law on tax is not black and white. Were it so, we wouldn't have this army of accountants and solicitors and lawyers making an absolute fortune out of advising either global companies or very rich people on how to avoid paying their fair share of tax.
Well, do you think he's done anything wrong?
Well, he thought that he was avoiding paying tax, and it turned out that he wasn't, right? That was the scheme was intended, perhaps, to be a mechanism for reducing tax bills, and it doesn't. That's the force of the legal judgment. And so now he'll have to pay the tax that he owes. I guess that many viewers will have had the experience of paying, say, they make their self-assessment forms, and they put those in for their tax, and it turns out that they didn't have the same tax obligations which they thought they had, and so they have to pay their extra as well. That's the fact that you end up having to pay extra tax isn't in itself a bad thing on your part.
But this is something which was going on under Labour. I mean, these schemes were everywhere. There were schemes to fund films, all sorts of things being offered, and the whole way in which this is done is absurd. You allow a plan to go out, and then you wait until you start avoiding tax, and then you wait until somehow the HMRC says, oh, hang on a minute, it's illegal. It's not, you can't do it. Well, that's a stupid way of doing things, and you set it up.
Well, let me first of all say I'm not making a party political point here. I think Labour didn't do enough on tax avoidance, and I think this government is starting to do things. They're not doing enough. The second thing, this isn't an honest mistake, as Andrew was suggesting. This was a deliberate intent. And the reality is a number of things. One is our tax system is very complex. We've got nearly 1,200 tax reliefs. Every tax relief set up perhaps for a perfectly legitimate purpose becomes a vehicle for tax avoidance. We have, I think the real thing out of this today is this army of accountants and lawyers who spend their time devising these schemes, and they're never 100% iron-bottom schemes. They're not
let's stop you there,
fail-safe.
because that is true, isn't it? I mean, look, tax avoidance is an industry.
There's nothing improper about not seeking to maximise your tax bill. I mean,
It may not be improper, but it's immoral.
No, it isn't.
Oh,
Very
yes.
often.
You surely have an obligation to your fellow humanity.
No, absolutely not. Much of the time. Let me make that
There
point.
is something improper about using a tax system, a tax code, which was set up for one purpose, to encourage investment in films, to another purpose, to avoid tax. That's improper.
But the judgment here said that this wasn't a tax avoidance, right? This failed to avoid tax, this particular scheme. There's nothing improper about using the incentives. Let me make the point. There's nothing improper about using the incentives in the tax system as they're intended to be used. So very often, for example, the government introduces special tax reliefs because it wants you to change your behaviour. Back in the past, many of you will remember there were lower taxes on unleaded than on leaded petrol because the government wanted you to modify your behaviour to take advantage of the tax breaks that were created. There's nothing improper about taking advantage of the law to pay less tax.
Well, I still go back to the point, therefore, that however much you may not like Andrew Lillico's view, the fact is it's you politicians who set up the structure. Why not bring in a simpler tax system? I mean, most of us in this company are on PAYE. We just pay the tax that we're asked for.
85% of us just pay the tax we're asked for. I agree. One answer is to simplify the tax code. I think HMRC, and I'm really pleased they took this action, should toughen up. But I also think the tax code is not black and white. It is open to interpretation. And I think we should start thinking about those advisors who make a fortune themselves out of devising schemes, which are then found, Andrew, to be unlawful.
Well, I would love to be able to take this on, but I want to thank you both, Andrew Lillico and Margaret Hodge, for coming in. Cathy.